It doesn't have to be too much or too intense. I think just something to get you out there and get the endorphins from the exercise is really important. You can either do it alone or maybe try doing it with different people. I think doing sports socially can be a really good thing too, and a good way to meet new people. I know for myself, I always feel much better when I exercise. I don't force myself to do it when I don't want to, I just try and go consistently, and that's what really helps me. So hopefully that can help some people. And one other thing I find very important, and I do say it quite often, is the importance of having goals and things that you're working towards. I think especially if you have an overactive mind, if you have too much idle time and too much isolation, I think sometimes it might give you too much time just to overthink and have your mind turning on itself. So I think it's always important to get out and have things to do. I know for myself that that's always the case. Even if I have a big break from work, I find that after about a week or 5 days, my mind seems to start turning on me and I overthink very little things in a negative way. So I find for myself that I have to have goals and things that I'm working on and get out and see people. So anyway, I hope that can help some people and I hope you'll enjoy these stories. Take care and I'll speak to you all soon. When I grew up, I'd always play out with the same group of kids. We all went to the same school together. I didn't actually live on the same side of town as them. Basically, the area that I grew up in had one big road that went down the middle, and it kind of divided them off pretty nicely. It made it a little bit of a pain to get over to the other side because the crossings were really slow, but that wasn't too much of an issue. The side of which I grew up in probably wasn't the best out of the two sides. There also wasn't really that much to do here. It made me get bored quite quickly. This was just basically before there was really video games or you couldn't really play them online. So obviously you get quite bored and you didn't end up doing much else. The only way that you could get around was by using your pedal bike. I don't have an issue with this. I actually have quite a nice one and I was really happy for having it. At the time, my brother would come with me sometimes when we'd play. Basically, we'd just agree what time we wanted to meet up at and just call each other on the house phones and then go outside. So it was pretty common for me to make my way across to the other side of town to play with some of my friends and just hang out there and relax generally. You know, basically just have a good time together. These were pretty good days. I absolutely love going to the store to get the big bottles of Pepsi. This is when you had them in the glasses and I thought that was kind of cool. It was something that I always looked forward to. To be honest, I'm not sure how that I didn't end up with diabetes because how bad my diet was. I just constantly ate bad food, but that was fine. While we were playing there was always rumours about some kind of weird house and some weird cave accompanying it that nobody could ever seem to locate. But we'd hear rumours about this off a few other people, and in fact actually some adults that warned us against going there. They said that if you ever see the old burnt out house or that cave, don't go into it. I mean, firstly, the way that you had to get there was through an area which flooded very often. When you walked through it, it honestly looked like an atomic bomb had hit the place. There was all kinds of downed trees and stuff over there, and all kinds of other things that you obviously couldn't move. It would actually make it a really dangerous cross into at the same time, which is one reason that you didn't really want to go there. They did have one log which had actually been cut down and made into some kind of bridge. The funny thing is, it didn't have barriers though on either side, so you could have easily fell. Not like the drop was very big, but I guess maybe in winter it could have been a lot more dangerous. However, we would so often go across there and just have an explore. I mean, you know how it is, when you're young and you've got that inquisitive nature, then anything like this you kind of jump at, just to get out there and have some adventure. We were so bored other than this. I mean, we had some sports like baseball and stuff which we would play, but we didn't do it too often. Thing is, there wasn't that many places that we could go and play at really. Where I lived, they had this really stupid habit of locking up everything really early. I mean, basically they'd close it as second that you'd got out of your school, and then it was dark, so there wasn't much you could do. The The ones that were actually open also kind of had a way of attracting weirdos and dodgy people. You know, like the people that just let their dogs run wild and chase absolutely everything and made no effort to call them back? Or just the drug dealers, just not a nice place. Especially not where you'd want to go when you were young, even though there was quite a big group of us. So anyway, we like coming to this place for a number of reasons, but the main one was just to get away from everything and just to have some fun together. We were always trying to look for that place though, but we could really never find it. We thought it was just rumours and that maybe this never existed. So we're all playing out here one day when one of us says, "Yeah, you know that cave? I think I know where it is." And basically we're following him. I actually had to bring my bike, and so did a few others of us as we went further into the woods trying to locate it. It's not really easy to pass through here though, to be honest, because I don't know what they were, but some kind of plants, like you know the ones with the little thorns and stuff, and the ones that sting you. I don't know what they're called, but they're on either side of us, other than the big trees, were the only thing that was safe from this, so it wasn't very nice passing through here. Luckily I had long socks on, so it didn't get my ankles, but I knew some of my friends were suffering. They actually try and drive on their bikes through it, but it's too exhausting, so it wasn't really the best of places. But we had faith in him, and he keeps on leading us on this adventure. Now, none of us were actually entirely convinced that he was going to be able to find it. I've heard so many stories of similar things off of other people before, saying that they've got a friend who can show them where something is and it doesn't come true. But I don't know. Just seeing the new scenery actually made it relatively interesting. It was kind of like bright but not too bright, if that makes sense. Like, you know, not when the sun's setting, but when it's cloudy and it's hard to tell exactly what time of day it was. Well, it's just like that. But we keep on going. We do this for quite a long time and we don't really seem to be getting anywhere. We were going so far now. Well, eventually we come up to an area which is much more rocky. Oh my god, what if this guy's actually right? I seriously didn't know what I'd do if we actually found this place. I mean, I was going to be too scared to go in truthfully. I could already feel my little heart pounding, and I was actually nervous about this. I didn't want to let on to the others, but I remembered thinking to myself that what if we actually have to go in this cave? It's not like any of us had torches or lights or anything, so we're not going to be able to see too well. And we come up to a Y shape in the road. We can either go downhill or across some bridge, and my friend actually stops for a while telling us that, well, he can't quite remember what way it is. We kind of looked at each other confused. It actually didn't dawn on us at the time, but we're very lost now, and we're going to have an issue actually getting home if we're not careful. But my friend would not stop going on about how that we're going the right way. So we eventually decided to go across the bridge. The main reason for that is that it's easier for us to go across on our bikes when my friend stops. He says, "Hey, look at that," and he turns and sprints on the other way until he jumps on his bike, and a few of the other guys all ride on their bikes trying to get out of there. Yes, they've played the abandonment trick on me. They've took me out here, and they thought it'd be funny just to ride off and just leave me on my own here. I could have easily caught up with them, but I just couldn't be bothered. I don't know why, I just basically turned and watched them going away. So off they went, and I just sat there, just taking it all in for a minute. Now, a lot of you might have thought that I was panicking, but I just wasn't for some reason. Now, I was left with some kind of ultimatum. I had to either press on alone or just head back to the relative safety. And probably for the first time in my life, I decided to be brave. I think it felt kind of nice to be on my own out here, so I just started driving very slowly on my bike, going across the bridge. I was taking advantage of the fact that I could drive along some flat ground and not really have too many issues here, so I do so. I'm doing it for a while and I eventually come up to an opening with lots of rocks everywhere. This is great, I think to myself. I'm now at a place where that I can ride my bike really easily, so I start doing so. I'd actually never really driven on rocky places like this before in my life, so I thought it was really cool to be able to do it on my bike. It looked really beautiful here. Now I've got some water on me, so every so often I'm just drinking that and periodically going to the toilet. I probably drank too much water, but I like the fact that it's making my backpack less heavy. At the time I thought it could make me go faster, and I get up to an area that seems oddly familiar. I don't know why that is. I've not been here before, but I seem to know what way I'm going. I rest for a moment and notice something odd. There's some kind of markings on one of the rocks close to me. It kind of looks like if you draw stick figures with their hands up in a Y shape. There was about 8 of these figures there, then a much larger one further off onto another rock. I think this is odd. I run my hand along it and can see that it's been there for a while. It's clear that it's been pretty well weathered since it was first put there. And I think this is kind of cool. I've not really seen much like this. Then I get a fright as I turn around and I go off balance. My bike has kind of went out from underneath me and I start falling with the bike. I'm still riding it, but I'm gaining momentum and my brakes don't seem to be working. This happens for probably about 10 seconds before I finally lose control and slam into a rock which throws me off my bike. I get up and I turn round and start panicking. My bike is ruined. My very front wheel has entirely broken. It's really dented, almost as though that you took a big sledgehammer and smashed it as hard as you can. And there was no way I was going to be able to use it unless I become a tricycle expert. I was in big trouble now. My mum was going to kill me. She literally just brought me it. I love that bike so much. It took me a while to calm down from this actually, and I start telling myself that it's going to be okay. Just keep going, just keep going. So now I continue on foot, which probably wasn't the best of ideas. But like I said, I seemed to know which way I was going. For some reason, I just instinctively knew that if I kept going down, I would probably get to this cave. That was weird. I sat there for a while, and I can see what I think is one more person near the mouth of where I think the cave might be, and then another appear. I'm actually really far away, but I decide just to stop and observe them. I really can't see. I try to cuff my hands to get a bigger view, or just to see what else is going on around myself and block out some of the sunlight, but it doesn't make much of a difference. So I just continue walking down the rocky trail. This is actually a welcome relief from the other area of which I was walking upon. It's a lot easier travelling down here, and I feel okay. I was really bummed out about my bike though. I just can't stop thinking about it. It was so perfect. I just loved that thing. I knew too that it was going to be a while before I could get another one, so I'm pretty deflated now, but I just keep going. I suddenly realised why I seem to know which way to go. I think it's all of the stories, all the way people described it is just like this, almost down in some kind of valley of such with rocks on either side of you, and the cave almost perfectly waiting for you in the middle, just tempting you with its calls. So I keep going now further and further, and it becomes more bright. I'm glancing up occasionally, trying to see what's going on, but I can't see any more movement. I do notice what appears to be some kind of orange tent though, and a green one, which might be a rock next to it. This is on another hill a bit further away. I remember the only logical possible explanation to this is that some other people have went here to explore just like I did. And in my young mind I think, yeah, they're going to be excited to see me. Now I do notice something that I can't be sure wasn't a figure of my imagination at the time, but I'm almost certain that one of the figures seems to make a Y pose, very similar to what I'd seen before. It was really weird. It was literally just like what I'd seen on the rocks. I can only see the one figure at the time, but I think this is quite weird. I think maybe they're just doing it for, I don't know, I want to find out. I have to have a battle plan now. I decide the best thing to do is go up towards where the tents are just to have a little explore and figure out what they're doing. Because even though I was naive, I wasn't entirely unsensitive to danger. My mum would argue that this isn't the case, and she still would now, but it didn't matter. I was there to investigate. So I kept on going. I'm not too far away from their tents, and as I walk closer, I notice that the wind starts picking up. Now, I've noticed that this isn't the only time this had happened. There was a few other times that the wind had picked up all of a sudden when I was out here like this, or at least on my own in the woods, and it was definitely odd. It kind of sounded like I was going up a mountain a bit, which is bizarre because there was no wind up until this point. I'm now going through an area which brings me closer to the woods and closer to the cave. I actually decided to follow the harder path which would lead me to the tents. I can make them out more clearly now. One is definitely orange and the other's kind of more hidden. I don't know if it has a camouflage pattern or if it's just green, but it's very difficult to see. I can only really figure out that it's a tent because of its close proximity to the other one. I decide to go into quiet mode now, basically not walking on the rocks making sounds. I was quite small then, so I'm not really bothered about standing up. I knew I could crouch down for a little bit. I suddenly hear some kind of sound. It sounded like a metal gate opening and it really scared me. I actually duck down and hide under a tree when I hear it. I waited here for probably about 5 minutes or so, looking around trying to see if there's anybody else here but me. I don't see anyone. Actually, it sounds more like a chain moving now that I hear it once more. So I just stop and wait. I'm really not sure what this is. I'm inquisitive but more scared, so I just stayed there for a while. About 20 minutes or so pass when I eventually decide that it's in fact safe enough for me to leave my retreat, and I start moving once more. So I'm making my way out and I get closer to the tents trying to be really quiet, and I notice the tents moving. I think, yeah, they've probably only just moved here or something and not really set it up properly, but I can't be absolutely sure. So I just wait and wait and wait, until eventually I notice something. The tent looks like it's in horrible condition. It looks like it's seen lots of storms. I now stand up and stop crouching as I'm trying to see it better, and I make my way closer to the other tent. That's odd, that looks exactly the same. I can actually see parts of it moving in the wind, almost in sync with the wind I can hear from being slightly further away. So now I go closer and closer until I can see that nobody's around. I feel confident enough to just walk normally on the rocks now, and I edge closer and closer, slowly creeping up to them. I go to the orange tent first, and this thing doesn't look like it's in good condition whatsoever. I can see it more so now. I crouch down and poke my head into the tent. Through that hole, I can see no one, just that this thing was abandoned long ago. For some reason this puts my mind at ease and I feel comforted by knowing this. I now turn around and go up to the green tent. I get a little bit closer to it and I realise I can't see into this. I have to open the zipper. I go to do so and the door's already opened. It smells really bad in here too. I only looked for a second, but I can see no one's in here. So I stand up with the sound of the wind all around me. That's really weird. Why would people have tents set up here and just seem to leave them like this? The first one didn't look like it was too cheap either, so I think this is a bit weird. Well, anyway, I've got to get to that cave. I stand up for a moment with the wind in my ears, and I just take a second to think, do I want to do this? Well, yeah, I decide that I want to. I've got to see what it is. I've got enough time in the day to just make it back, and the sun's come up now, and I feel more confident. I'm constantly looking out for different people, by the way. I probably should have mentioned this more, but I was being incredibly vigilant at the time of this. So I keep making my way down, and there it is, the cave. Wow. Beautiful. More pretty than I expected it to be. It looks very warm and inviting. I spend a while trying to figure out if I should definitely go or not. I realise that I'm probably not going to be able to see too much, and I quickly look around for my backpack. Oh yes, I think to myself as I realise that I have a lighter in the pack. I didn't smoke or anything, just sometimes we'd like to make little campfires on our adventures, and I had it for this. Great, and that thing was almost full. I test it out and I accidentally burn myself. I realise I'm going to have to be careful or not do it when I'm actually outside in the wind. I take a look around one more time just to make sure nobody else is here, and then I notice it again, more strange markings on some of the rocks close to here. What is that? I just don't know why I keep seeing them. It seems weird that they're all leading up to the cave. I'm stuck here pondering why this would be here when I hear the wind in my ears once more. It kind of snaps me out of it, and I run my hand along it again. I don't know why, maybe it was OCD or some kind of habit, but I do so, then decide that I should just keep pressing on now, and be strong. I start slowly making my way towards the cave, and my feet feel incredibly heavy. I've got the lighter in my hand. My hand's quite cold from gripping it so much. I think I stopped the blood flow, so I stopped doing that after a little bit. I start making my way towards the mouth of the cave when I see something further in. I don't know exactly what it was, but I can definitely see something there. Maybe it's some kind of glowing mushrooms or something, or fireflies. I don't know. It's definitely something with a faint glow there. So I step in, and I can hear what sounds like water dripping. This gave it a really creepy sound, especially mixed with the sounds of the wind outside. I'm gonna keep going, but it definitely felt odd. It kind of felt like you put me into the scene of some kind of haunted house or something, or you know the movies where the world's ended through, I don't know, atomic bombs or something, and you're out in a wasteland and the explorers just come outside? Or I don't know if any of you have played the Fallout 3 game when he just leaves the vault. It was just like that. It was just kind of weird. I suppose it did look a little bit like it if I think of it now. But I decided to go in. I don't flash the light immediately using my torch. I thought I should let my eyes adjust a little bit. I still had some senses about me. I take my steps now in sync with the dripping of the water in the background. Drip, 1 foot, drip, another foot, and so on. I'm just constantly doing this, trying not to be noticed. I now realise that I need to flick on the light because I've just walked into a rock and I'm scared I'm gonna hurt myself. Okay. I slowly raise the lighter up with my hand trembling a little bit and flick on the light. Nothing changes. I can see that there's something along the sides of the walls. I don't know what it is, actually. Maybe it's like slime or something, but it's almost like a strange liquid which is a little bit reflective. The cave seems really dark too. I mean, it doesn't match the outside rocks which are white, it's really dark. The only reason I could really see where I was going is because of the reflections of this. I realise now that I'm gonna have to keep my lighter on, which is okay. I just set the flame to the brightest setting, and I start making my way forward. It was actually getting too hot for me, so I decided to use part of my jumper. I know that's a stupid idea because it could have set me on fire, but I wasn't thinking straight. I I can't see anything glowing now because where I'm going. It's hard to describe it, but it's kind of like I could only see maybe 1 or 2 feet in front of myself, if that. I knew I was definitely progressing the right way because of the dripping sound going on every so often, getting louder. But that wasn't comforting. Then, I hear a sound again, kind of like a metallic one. It sounded like a heavy chain swinging. That's odd. I drop down very quickly, turning off the light as I do so. I couldn't be certain if it was because of the wind or not, but it was definitely odd, and I don't know where this is coming from. For some reason I get it in my head that now I kind of want to get a move on to try and make my way away from whatever this thing is. So I quickly flicker on the light again, and I can see the faint glow of something. It's not too bright, and I presume that it's going to be a big column of glowing mushrooms or something. I don't know. So I make my way closer and closer. I realise that because of the way the rocks are, I'm not going to be able to see it until I'm right there. It was like looking down into something, but you've got rocks obstructing your view. So I go a little bit further, turning off my light for a second so I can feel along the walls. They're very cold and slimy. It doesn't smell bad, so I've not got an issue doing so. I now get to the corner and decide to flick on my light, holding it out in front of me, extending my hand. I don't know why, this made me feel more safe for some reason. I felt like, well, if they can see my hand first, if there is anyone in here, they're going to react to it, or say something, so it gives me an extra second just to run. But that doesn't happen. I did so for about 4 seconds before waving my hand around, thinking that maybe I could taunt something, but nothing happens. Okay, let's go. Well, I turn off the light for a second and I realise that it's glowing brighter now, these mushrooms. Then, I come around the corner and I'm amazed to see so many of these different mushrooms everywhere. There was probably about 7 or 8 different sections of it, and I can't make out exactly what it is at first. I flick on the lighter again, and I realise that they're all connected together. I hold my lighter up towards where some are, and then I realise it's got a different shape, which seems somehow familiar, but I don't know how to describe it. It takes a second, but I realise that these seem to be bones, which is somehow glowing very slightly. It almost looked like if you put the glow-in-the-dark paint off of a watch, which was really fading away onto them. And I can't make out what they are. I do something probably stupid, but I didn't know what else to do. I take out some of the scrunched up newspaper that we used to use before to make fire, and some other things. I actually had quite good materials to make a torch because of having firewood and things like that. So, in the dark, I managed to set this up and tie everything together with the newspaper to make a big torch. It takes a while and I can't seem to set fire to it, until eventually, boom, off it goes. Now it takes about 2 seconds as I kind of blind myself as I was staring straight at it, and then I illuminated the whole room. I'm now stood, almost surrounded by 7 or 8 skeletons, all turned to face me. I can now see that only one of them has a very faint glow, the others are barely at all, and I'm just stuck in a trance there. I wipe up my eyes quickly and slap my head, probably about 5 or 6 times, starting to slowly panic. What the heck is this? I've never seen skeletons before in real life, so I don't know why they're all like this. Some of them are just piles in the corner, but some of them look like they've been propped up to look like they're actually people. I, for some reason, just stayed here for about 1 or 2 minutes, just taking it all in. The cave actually goes on even further when I hear the metal sound again, from now even deeper into the cave. That was my cue to get out of there. I'm very scared that something's going to come from deeper in the cave, so I start moving backwards very slowly and very carefully, feeling along the wall. I trip myself over and out goes the light at the same time. Oh come on, you've got to be kidding me. I say to myself, as I turn around, not really able to see now, fummaging around for my lighter. Eventually, I'm able to find it, and I'm feeling along the wall. I keep expecting to hear the metallic sound behind myself again, but I don't hear much of anything. I don't know where my torch has gone, so that's really frustrating. I wish I actually had a flashlight, an actual source of light that wasn't so basic, but I didn't think to. I can now see the mouth of the cave, and I start making myself more and more confident, trying to talk to myself positively in my head. As soon as I get to a part that I'm in a clearing, I sprint out of there. I don't know why I felt so scared. Probably because I've never been in that situation before, but it was weird. I felt fear in reverse. Maybe it was my body taking a while to react to what had just happened. But I was more scared running than when I was actually there. Would you believe it? So I decided that I'm gonna run just the exact way that I've come. Luckily, this part is downhill, so I don't have too much of an issue with it. I didn't look around, I was just more focused on the ground. It was almost like everything in my surroundings went blurry except for what was directly in front of me, and I keep up the pace. I'm running, and now I'm almost about halfway to where the ground level's out again, and I have to go back uphill. I stop for a second before sprinting and turn to look, and I can see the figures once more. It kind of looked like two ants because where I was, but they're at the mouth of the cave, and you can see that they're searching for something, almost like when you've just disturbed someone and they're trying to get their bearings about them. I take a deep breath and start sprinting. This is all the fuel that I needed. Now I am religiously looking over my shoulder watching them as they grow further and further away, becoming smaller and smaller. Now the last thing I could see of them is that they both went back into the cave. God, what have I just discovered? What have I just unearthed, I think, as I'm making my way back now. I was actually really scared when I see the markings on the rock that I'd seen before again. It kind of gave me a surge of adrenaline as I realised that everything was linked somehow, and I didn't like it. I luckily still have a little bit of water, but drink it too fast and it actually makes me vomit a bit. I was so scared I didn't even stop to do this. I did it on the go and keep going. I don't know where my bike is, but I was probably too scared to notice it, as I'm now making my way through the forest. It was pretty tough going, but I didn't feel too much pain at the time. My legs are definitely starting to get more numb now, as I keep going. I make my way back into the bigger part of the forest that I was familiar with. Now the sun was still shining quite high in the air, and I think that gave me some form of confidence knowing that I'm not out here in the dark. So I keep on going until eventually I get up to where the familiar area is, and I'll be able to make my way back home now. As I get there, I realise that none of my friends are there, and I can't believe that they've abandoned me like this. I can't believe what I'd seen. I eventually make it to the relative safety of a little bit of civilization, and I'm trying to keep up kind of like a fast walking pace to get back home. I actually hear a cop car, and for some reason it made me panic. I thought somehow I'd trespassed and they were looking for me, so I actually ducked down waiting for them to go. I say to myself, come on man. I almost felt like I was on some kind of secret mission, just trying to get back out of here. Well, eventually I make it back to my home just in time for dinner. I now have a new danger and fear. My mum. What's she gonna do when she realises the bike's gone? She says, hey, where's your bike? And thinking on my feet, I said, oh yeah, Matt's got it. I gave it to Matthew and his brother for the week. And she says, oh, that's so kind of you. And I didn't say much of anything. I just ate my dinner and then went straight up to bed. I could tell I was exhausted, but I didn't know how much so. I actually slept through until maybe 1 PM the next day, so I got over 12 hours sleep and I felt good for resting. It's probably been about 20 or so years since this experience, and I never actually found out what was in those caves. whether they're actually real skeletons or not, or why one of them seemed to be glowing, or who those people were. I ended up never going back to that area once more, but for all I know they could still be out there, and something horrible could have happened. I don't sleep easily at night, and sometimes I just can't stop thinking about it and it makes me panic. This occurred when I was about 15 or 16. I was also with a friend of about the same age and his dad. We were exploring the woods behind our houses. We lived in the same neighborhood. We went back into these woods many times to hike around and play paintball. One day though, we decided to go a little deeper in the woods just to check it out. A little background is that this is an old forest growth / protected wetlands area with a few square miles that are surrounded by roads on all 4 sides, located in the northeast United States. For a while, we were wandering along. It was mid/late spring, so the forest is pretty lush and green, when one of us sees a small patch of white coming through the woods. I mean, it stood out quite easily in contrast to the green leaves, so we decided to investigate, and the 3 of us headed off in directions towards this mysterious white spot coming through the leaves. If you've ever walked through dense woods, you'll know how difficult it is to go in a straight line because of fallen logs and brush. Anyway, we keep walking towards this object for what seems like a while, but this object still hasn't come into focus. It looks like it's a white blob, and it's just getting further and further away from where we spotted it. We didn't think too much of it at this point, or at least I didn't, and continued walking in the direction of this thing. It must have happened 2 or 3 times that we'd walk towards this thing for a few minutes, stop and notice that we aren't getting any closer. Now by this point, I think there was a little tension building, but nothing out of the ordinary. At some point though, as we're getting closer, we do notice the object is starting to fill out. We can clearly see now that it's a tiny white house on a hill. I'd say the structure was about the size of a shed you might keep your lawnmower in. We were excited because how often do you come across something like that? It's still a little ways away, but again, very obvious that this little white house is what we had seen and were walking towards. So we continue towards the little house, and we lose sight of it momentarily as we go up over another hill, but as soon as we come to the top of the hill, the house is gone. Now we're really confused and both look at each other but keep walking up the hill that we've seen the house on. This last part happened pretty quickly. We get to the top of the hill, still looking at the other hills close by to see if maybe we just turn around or something and we'd see the little house, until one of us noticed an old foundation at the grounds where there obviously a house had once been. The shape of the foundation was exactly the size of this mysterious vanishing white house. I barely had time to notice the foundation when all 3 of us heard a growl, which sounds like it's getting louder until it's almost as loud as a chainsaw. Nothing was said, but the 3 of us, including my dad's friends, all sprint out of the woods in the direction that we've come. I don't recall ever discussing what happened to the 2 other friends I was with that day. Since this happened, I tried looking on Google Maps for some kind of indication that the house was there, but it's just a forest which is too thick. About 1.5 years ago, I told my brother what happened and we went back into those woods looking for the house's foundation, but I didn't find anything. Although, our search wasn't very thorough though. It was winter, so it's pretty cold and had snow on the ground. But it'd be hard to pick out where the house was meant to be because of the snow. One of the weirdest stories I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a Forest Service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, To start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our second child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a second. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now, where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years, and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place, I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. I'm not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day, I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound, and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently, there was a ranger that worked here, and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something. I don't know, kind of like aliens? They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a specific area where you'd feel very hot. Completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there, or something weird that shouldn't have been there, but again, they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out, and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above, ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then they'll say, why did you do that? And you'll explain that's how you're trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? Once again, get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas just to see if I could find something, anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now, I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly, the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now, a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remembered that I was out there, that I spotted something weird, I mean really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stopped too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realise that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach, and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon, and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident, and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush, and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now, and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing, and I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where their faces are completely covered up in something. Now, I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly, I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's going to go, what my wife's going to do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's going to pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before. The ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. And I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all. Now this is an experience which happened to me in the spring of 2018. I had a few which could be considered paranormal in life, but this was the most recent one and unnerving. I'm an avid outdoorsman and love to hunt and camp around the Francis Marion and Sumpter National Park. Back in 2018, I took my young son and dog out to a remote area in the National Forest to test out a new camper shell on my recently purchased truck. We found a secluded area of a dirt road, made dinner, and then packed it in for the night as soon as it got dark. Around 11 PM at night, I sat up and looked out the back due to the sound of a dog growling. In the distance, I saw what looked like hundreds of small white balls of light darting around, hovering a few seconds and slowly converging on our campsite. They just looked like dust orbs that you've seen on videos, but these were producing light in a completely dark forest. They then surrounded my truck, and it felt weird almost seeing like hundreds of them. They're like a soft white light and they don't blink. They just kind of float around. And then I finally work up the nerve to open the truck and lit a lantern, and promptly they disappear. After turning off the lights and locking up, they come back. My son was fast asleep, thank goodness. I watched him until I fall asleep around 1 AM. The next morning when we tried to leave, the battery on the truck was dead. There wasn't any lights in the back cab where we would have used any power, and a week later we actually had to replace the electrical control module. Not sure what happened. During my summers, I'd spend a lot of my time working as a fire ranger. Now, this is a job which worked different to how it does in America. I would have to do this during the summer, but I'd also have to commit to doing some other jobs too. Basically in the winter, when it could be quite cold in some regions of my country, you'd have to go miles away from home and basically just patrol. Now we actually had a nickname for this job. You were basically the lost soldiers, patrolling land for seemingly no reason whatsoever. And like lost soldiers, you are very liable to get picked off. Now, when we said picked off, we would jokingly mean snipers, but basically we'd mean while wandering out there alone, you could easily die of the cold or something. It was such a stupid job. I mean, actually, they ended up outlawing this because of how dangerous it was. It just seemed so stupid to me, and like such a big waste of human life to have to go out there for no reason. This actually went on for years and years before they made us stop, but I guess at least I experienced it, and maybe I actually learned something from it. Now, what exactly I learned, I don't think I can tell you. To be honest, I would often just get lost in my thoughts while out there. I mean, when you've got nobody else to talk to, you can't always get a radio signal. What are you supposed to do? I can't answer that. Now, there was one strange occurrence which would happen. Every so often while wandering, we would encounter what we called the drunken man. This is somebody who would seemingly stumble around there in the middle of nowhere, go missing without a trace. It was actually quite scary sometimes. We said drunken because that's the way that this person seemed to walk, but they might have been injured or something, but this sighting went on for years and years, so we didn't think it was a real person. I remembered encountering him one day, and I was desperate to figure out who this is. I remembered really struggling to keep up. His clothes were tattered and worn, kind of looking like that of somebody who didn't have a home, but something felt off about this. I kept going for what felt like miles and miles, but I never seemed to be able to actually capture this person. I remembered one really weird encounter was when I was trying to catch up with this guy, and suddenly there seemed to be others moving very quickly through the forest. It was really scary. It was almost like loads of people would just randomly run through different parts of the forest. It was kind of like they didn't have a direction either, almost like atoms being scattered in something. It felt really weird. There seemed to be order but also chaos at the same time. So I knew this was definitely a weird moment, but it seemed like whenever I tried to approach these people, I just couldn't get close enough. It was really weird, but in the end I just kind of grown used to it. I accepted that we'd have weird encounters with the drunken people, and that's all we'd think of it really. So yeah, that was definitely a strange part of this job. Now, I absolutely adored the summer part. It was so nice being up in those areas. You had so much peace of mind, and you know what else you had? Being up in the tower, you get a really good radio reception. I would actually bring my own radio just to talk to other people who are into that, and it was really nice. You really had a community feel, and it's kind of weird to say, but you felt like others were there with you. But in the snow, you had none of that. However, I did have something that made everything so much more interesting that I still can't explain today, even more weird than the drunken walkers. Let me explain. There was a rumour going around that there was some kind of strange facility or something out there that shouldn't have been. Apparently, there was either some kind of illegal operation where people would log or something similar going on there. Every so often, we'd see some big trucks moving through, but we couldn't seem to figure out exactly who they were or where they were going. Just every so often you'd hear that familiar sound of an engine, and we'd never seemed to be able to get close. We were growing a little bit paranoid, but we didn't think much of it. I remember speaking to one of my friends on the rarest of occasions where I got to do my patrol with the other guy, and we were mentioning how weird this was. I said, what would you do if you found out who they were? He said, well, nothing. It could be drugs or something. You don't want to get involved with that. I said, yeah, you're right. We were walking down some wooden banister type thing on one of the man-made areas of where we patrolled, but I couldn't help thinking to myself that I wanted to explore what this actually was, and I kind of knew that if I ever found this place, I was going to have to be the first person to figure out what it was. So we started talking about a few other things, and my friend turns and says to me, watch out there, and I say thank you, you too. We now have to part ways because where we are. For some reason though, the conversation seemed to stick with me, and I was more eager than ever now to actually find out what was out there. Again, this is another problem with the role, because if you're out there all day, you might get fixated on one thing, whether it's irrational or not. But here I was, hopefully encountering my old friend, the drunken walker, but I didn't find anything. A number of weeks passed and everything falls into monotony. Nothing new's happening, not much to see, not much to do, when eventually, I'm sitting down taking a break, opening my coffee. Even this coffee has gone cold, I think to myself. I just can't think of how this can get much worse. And as I'm sitting there, annoyed about this, drinking my lukewarm salvation drink, I hear something. It's the slow grumble of an engine. I think, that's it. This has happened for a reason. This is my destiny to figure out what this is, as I slowly get up. Now, it took me a while. I didn't really have the best hearing, so I really couldn't figure out where the sound was coming from. I did hear the sound of the engine getting louder and louder, so I was certain now that I was going to find where they had gone to. So I turned around and realised that it's coming from over the hill. The problem is it's not going to be easy to access this area. It means that I'm going to have to do a little bit of hiking and go through some pretty rough terrain. I'm actually quite defeated now and think that I've lost it. But I still continue that way regardless. I've at least figured out the road that they go on now. So I'm walking with snow covering everywhere, thinking that I just wish I had a warm coffee here. I'd also bought some expensive gloves recently which broke immediately and I was pretty annoyed about it. Again though, it's what I said, when you spend too much time out here with nothing else going on, you fixate on stupid things and you don't really think rationally any longer about situations and whatnot. So now, I continue on like normal, and I seem to get closer to where I can get a vantage point and figure out what this is. So I get over the hill and I can see a long narrow road. I decide to join it now. I don't think that I'm going to get to where I'm desiring to go, but at least if I head in the direction I should figure out where this is and make a mental note so I can come back. I noticed some moss on the trees and other plants and I thought this is interesting because you don't really see it commonly out here. Everything's usually doused in white, so that was bizarre to see. I continue on and I think I can just about make out sight of where the truck goes around a corner. I can't be certain because how far away I am, but I'm convinced this is something, and I come up to a small man-made bridge. I can also see the tyre tracks in the snow, so I decide that I'm going to follow them. Now I should mention that at this point I'm starting to go quite far beyond my boundary of where I'm supposed to go. But to be honest, I just stopped caring. It's like, you know when you work in a job where you've had so much rubbish to deal with that you no longer care if you get fired that day? It was sort of like that. I mean, yeah, I needed the money, but I didn't care so much. I knew I'd be okay regardless. So I continue walking when I hear it. The slow rumble of another engine, and it wasn't too far away. I think it's coming from up ahead, and I'm convinced that the truck is returning to where I am, so I stop dead for a moment. I stare and stare, but strangely, it doesn't seem to be getting any larger, and I don't seem to be getting any closer to anything. I basically can't see much of anything. There's some kind of movement ahead of me, but I can't make out what it is. But the sound is getting closer. Then, in an idiotic moment, I turn around and realise the truck's coming from behind. That means I've got to hide then. I think, God, this isn't great, they're going to see my footsteps. The problem is too, because where I'm standing, I'm basically flanked by trees that I can't really go through. They're kind of too thick and dense. I mean, I can, but it's going to be obvious where I've went. So I instead start picking up the pace. I strangely feel a little bit of fear now, as I start to move further and further away, knowing that this thing is getting closer to me and I'm going way beyond where I normally do. I decided to start running inside the tracks themselves to make it less obvious that somebody was here. I eventually get up to another area where I think I can jump into the trees and not be seen, or at least with my footsteps. I decided to palm a lot of snow off of a tree and start covering the 2 footsteps leading out from the road into the branches. I look back, but I still don't see anything, and I'm not too worried. The good thing is I have a white coat, so it's probably a bit harder to see me than not, but I don't really want to chance it. I go a bit further ahead, and luckily there's a stream, so I know that it's going to perfectly cover me. As I go to hide under the bridge thing, I almost fall in, and that's the most scary part for me. I know if I go in the water, nobody's going to find me or rescue me. We've actually had a couple of people die from this before. In fact, they've actually went across bridges that were supposed to be safe that has ended up collapsing on them, and well, you know the rest. So yeah, I certainly didn't want to join their ranks or be another memory of this place, so I just wait. Now the truck seems to be getting closer, but I still can't see it. I've covered up myself so that just my eyes are showing, and I hope that I'm able to actually spot them first. It gets very close and then suddenly stops, and I hold my breath. God, they found me. This is it, I think, as I hear 2 people get out. Now, I can't hear what's actually happening too well. I just know that I have to stay still. The problem is, because of the lack of movement, it's actually making me really cold now. And for some reason, being near the water made me so much more cold, and I start shaking. My teeth are actually chattering together, and I bite down to try and stop this making too much sound. But then, I hear them get back in, a door close, and the engine start up, and they continue on their way. I let out a sigh of relief as I exhale, and I can feel the moisture of my breath onto the coat. I then come further out of where I'm hiding, and I can see it slowly going off. The truck. Yes, that's it. I've done it. I've made it. I'm suddenly filled with exuberance as I slowly make my way out of the cold and back onto the path. Now, I didn't actually check if anybody else was around. I was just convinced that they had gone off. Well, I see them round the corner, and I'm pretty convinced that I know exactly where I need to go now. I think, yes, finally, I've got them. I honestly can't wait to actually explore what this place is or where they're going. I mean, literally nobody seems to figure out exactly what this is, and I'm excited to potentially be the first. So I get up and keep making my way forward, very excitedly. I just keep telling myself that this is going to be it. You're going to solve this mystery. And I keep making my way further. It was actually getting a little bit dark now. Now, I knew I had a while before it was completely dark, but I didn't want to be out here in the cold. As I then start to see some kind of barbed wiry fence as I go off the road onto another path which runs parallel to it. I think, yes, this is it. What is this place? As I see the facility is larger than I expected it to be. Now, it seems like there's a large perimeter, and I'm not sure if the fence is actually electrified or not. I spent quite a while trying to figure out if I can actually go in there or not, and I think, how am I going to navigate this? I didn't know how well they could work in the cold. I spent probably about 15 minutes of this before eventually I think, oh yeah, I can literally just go around, and kind of laugh at myself as I realise there's a big gap in the fence. I think so much for security. Now, the sense of danger has completely eroded to the sense of adventure, and I keep going further. I can't see any other steps in the snow, so I'm pretty convinced that I'm the only person here. So that means that I can get my adventure underway, and I'm very excited for this. So I go further and further, and eventually come up into a clearing near a small waterfall. I stop by the waterfall, and I think, well, where is it? There literally doesn't seem to be anything, which is especially odd. I also can't see the trucks anymore, so I think maybe they've just stopped, and maybe it was nothing, and I actually feel a bit disappointed now. Well, after not too long, I have a look round, and I see nothing. I think, God, is this all I've done? I've just wasted all my time, and I'm gonna get home late because I'm stupid. I start talking to myself when I hear a truck again, and I duck down. I look up and I can see a truck pulling up to a tiny cabin, then not much else. It's more like a wooden hut than anything. This thing was tiny. I decided that I had to figure out what this was. Why were they all stopping at this one thing? That's weird. As I then realised that the truck's starting to turn round again. It hasn't stopped so much, it's been stopped and it's now on the move. So I'm still hiding and trying to figure out what else I can do now. Now, I was almost face down in the snow and getting very cold, and I decided to very slowly make my way behind a tree. The chances of being spotted up here is pretty low, to be honest, so I'm not too bothered. I eventually make my way up there, and I camp out for a little while. I watch as this truck slowly comes past on that same road again. It's a large truck which is unmarked. I think that's interesting. After probably about 10 more minutes, that thing eventually goes off, and I think, well, yeah, it's time for me to go further up now. I took a look around and I can't see anything, just snow covering everywhere. I decide that I can follow the tree line and probably not be seen as I go up there. The thing was, it was quiet. There was no reason for me to believe logically that anybody else was up here, and the chances are it was simply myself here. So yeah, I'm pretty happy when I realise this. It makes everything so much more exciting for me. So now, I start to go further along, and eventually, I make it closer towards that hut thing. Again, I can't see anything, but I do see more tracks in the snow, so that definitely meant that there were others around here. So it's definitely an interesting one. I just want to know what this is. So I slowly, bravely make my way over there. Again, I don't hear anyone, so I don't presume that there's any reason for me not to investigate this, which is probably a mistake. But I get up and I really can't see anything around. I'm just perplexed as to why this is here, why the truck stopped here. I think, well, if there's something dodgy, I'll be able to see it and quickly go anyway. Who knows, maybe it's filled with frozen bodies or something. I had a strange feeling though when I was here. I look round and there's no windows on this thing either. There's definitely something being hidden in here, and I just want to find out exactly what it is. So I go through. I then eventually make my way towards where I can see a door which is unlocked, which I think is really funny. I do have a flashlight on me, but it's only a really small one, which is basically the size of a pen. But that doesn't matter though. So I open it, and I see an elevator. Now, the elevator shaft doesn't seem to match the environment. It looks kind of too clean, kind of too perfect, and I realise this is interesting. My hands are now shaking as I raise my hand up towards where the button is to get the elevator to work. My hand's still shaking now, and I'd say I just can't do this. I so badly want to know what this is, but I don't know what's waiting for me on the other side. As I do so, I hear some kind of echo or something, and it sounds like it comes from very far down. I think, this is so weird. Then, eventually it lights up. I jump back, and I quickly go out, now running, trying to get back. Something is coming up there and I don't know what it is. The thing is, it appeared so quickly. I only have time to hide on the opposite end of this, and I wait. I'm waiting, expecting to hear somebody come in, but I don't hear anything. Now, I thought this was weird, and I slowly peer around one edge, very slowly, and I see nothing. I look over my shoulder, still nothing. I realise the coast is clear, so I open the door again, and I can now see the shaft open. I then decide, stupidly, to step in. Now, I don't know why I'd done this, but I just wanted to see what it would feel like. And then, the shaft closes, and I start to panic. I watch the daylight slowly fade through the door, and I start panicking, thinking, oh no, you're so stupid. Why on earth did you come here? What did you expect? And I get really angry with myself. Then, the shaft starts to move down slowly. Weirdly, there's no buttons to press on the inside. I have never felt so much fear in my life. It almost felt like I was heavy, and like I just couldn't move. I then realised how warm this place is, as I start to go further and further underground. It was a long time. It probably took almost a full minute to get there, and I actually faced away from the door, and then I feel myself coming to a stop, and I slowly turn around. There's no pinging sound to let you know that you're at your destination. I was frozen to the spot as I see what's a very, very long corridor. I mean, it was so far that I could barely see the end of it, going further and further underground, with white coloured concrete walls. I can't hear anything at the other end of it. I just wait, unsure if I should proceed or not. I go to take one foot out of the door when I feel absolutely frozen. I have a feeling that if I proceed here, I'm not going to make it back. Then I hear a very, very weird sound. It's like a metallic scratching sound which is very loud, followed by some kind of screaming. I don't know what it is. I suddenly recoil back into the shaft. I take a deep breath out, and then I jump back as I hear a sound right next to me. The doors are closing. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or not, because I don't know if I'm going further underground or not at this point. I seriously have no idea what was happening. So I just waited, completely frozen again with fear. Now eventually, I feel the pull of gravity and I start to go up again. I kind of collapsed into the corner a bit at this point, as I felt just so much relief as to not be trapped there. Honestly, it was really unreal. I don't believe in God or anything, but I honestly felt like some kind of holiness entered my body then and took me out of the danger. Going up felt internally long for some reason. I then realised that I'm probably going to another floor. The elevator then stops for a second, but continues on its way, as I'm now violently shaking. It's not because of the cold, I'm actually very warm. It's because of the fear, just pure fear and somewhat agony. Eventually, I get closer and closer to the top, and I hear the doors open and see some light. The door's still open from when I last come there. I slowly turn around just to look at the thing to make sure it was real, as I go out the door, closing it behind myself. I took a while as I very slowly walked away, almost like I'd just come back from war or something, a little bit confused by all of it. I don't quite know what to make of it, when I hear the vibration sound of a truck's engine again. I let out a very small and faint gasp as I start sprinting to the tree line. The problem is, this time it was much closer than I'd expected. I'm busted. They've definitely seen me. I eventually get up to the tree line, and I decide that all I can do now is keep moving. I'm moving for quite a while, expecting to hear the truck stop, but it doesn't at first. I think, God, guards are coming for me, guards, as I keep running along here. The thing is, I don't really know my way, and I obviously shouldn't have been here. That's obviously by far the most apparent thing here, but I was too stupid. Why did I come here? What on earth was the benefit of this? I start cursing myself over and over again. I continue on, and eventually I get up to where the small bridge is again and make my way over. I'm now stuck with a harrowing moment where I have to go back onto the path where the trucks are coming, but I don't have a choice. I start doing so and I hear the engine again. It made me turn into some kind of super sprinter as I keep going. The thing was, I got messy now because of the fear. I wasn't following a nice neat path. It was going to be really obvious that somebody had been walking up here, but I didn't care. It seems like I can keep pace with this truck, finally. It's not gaining on me, but it means it's not getting further away. but I realise I can't keep up this pace for too long. I eventually dash out of the road into the woods as I get back onto a more normal trail. Within 10 minutes, I can no longer hear the truck and I'm back onto the normal paths. The only footsteps I can see are my own, and I continue following them. I think it was comforting knowing that I'm at least following parts of myself, and I kept going fixated on this. I actually only stared at the ground at this point. I did so for about 25 minutes, and I eventually get back to the normal areas that I known. I didn't stop going though. My knees actually start to feel like they're jelly. It's exhausting running in the snow, but that's what I'd done for quite a long time now. I eventually make it back, and I didn't finish my job. It was just about daylight, and I eventually get back into my car. I sat there shaking for probably another 30 or 40 minutes as I realised that I've discovered something I wasn't supposed to. Now, I knew that I had done something wrong, but I was just scared of what consequences might come later on. So I sat here for a little while before deciding that I've got to get home, and I decided to tell nobody about what I'd seen. In fact, I've only recently, all these years later, decided to be a bit more honest about it, but I know I shouldn't have been there, but stupidly I was. Now, the following story took place in Western Germany. It all started with a horrible sound of screaming outside my house at night, which I already compared to all the animal wildlife sounds from zoology institutes, but nothing comes close to it. It sounded like a woman screaming in agony, but then again even worse. It felt like I could feel the vibrations in my vein. It's hard to describe, but it was really scary. I live in a tiny house next to the forest and mountains. It was dark in October, and I laid in my bed, which is in a sleeping corner. Right next to it is a window, which is always half opened, and above it is just a flat roof, garden all around the home. At first I heard one animal/creature scream. Now there seemed to be two of them. They sounded to be very close and wouldn't stop screaming for a couple of minutes. The next thing I heard was something heavy running through the garden under my bedroom window, followed by heavy branches breaking at the height of my level on the second floor. I also heard a loud rush of air/wind combined to that. In the next second, this animal/creature jumped on my roof so that in a moment it was right above me. And that was the moment when things start to get messy and confusing for me. First thing I want to point out, that this animal/creature sounded so heavy when it landed. I don't know any animal species that are that big around here. It sounded massive and therefore surreal. Also, the quickness of its movement seems unreal to me. After that, it jumps on my roof from one side to the other. It first sounded like it was something extremely heavy on two legs, but that suddenly changes to what sounds like something extremely heavy on four paws. I remembered sitting straight up in my bed under it almost with an intense pulse and my mind just trying to process what I'm hearing. What kind of creature is it? Now, that was almost a turning point when I seriously felt threatened. Since I'm a girl living alone in a tiny home, I didn't really have any protection to fight off something like this, so I just decided to do something stupid. I thought, maybe I can shock it or scare it away, so I hit my bed against my hand as hard as I could, as loud as I could. Now, not even 1 second passed after I hit the glass. Then this creature goes from back towards outside. It must have basically been sitting right above me in that moment, basically reached down my window, and it reacted so quickly it was surreal. The sound of what touched my window glass felt like a mixture of claws and feathers. This reaction and the way it sounded kind of put me in shock, I guess. I realized I'm quite in a bad situation now, because whatever it was clearly very intelligent, huge, and wouldn't back down. That's how it felt to me, at least. As if I didn't have any power in that situation. Basically, I just froze on my bed. and my back was against the wall, and all I can do is basically just wait now. Now, I was too scared to close my window. I was too scared to breathe, but suddenly it just jumped off my roof. It sounded like a massive weight had fell. Now, I've never encountered anything like this before. I felt so alone with it, until last night, when I went on the internet and found something similar. Somebody within the last 24 days had actually encountered something almost exactly the same. Now I know that I wasn't the only one who encountered this, but it leaves me with the question, what was it? A few years ago in my previous home, I saw a strange apparition in the hallway by my son's room. It looked like a hazy, distorted figure of a human. I didn't think too much of it and thought that my mind was just making me believe something was there that truly wasn't. It occurred a few times, but then one day, I heard my son screaming and crying. I couldn't tell if his cry was that of something that he'd seen, or if it was less serious. I ran in there nonetheless, and he was crying, saying that he saw a big scary man in the room who was scaring him. It was one of the weirdest moments in my life. I knew nobody else was in the home, but I could tell my son was truly terrified by whatever he had seen. My wife was with me when this happened, and afterwards, she told me that she had seen the same thing, but also thought nothing of it. We had a spare bedroom by the kids' room where my grandparents stayed when they're in town. They also spoke of hearing footsteps in the night as well as voices. I never experienced those specifically, but I don't know what it could have been. I'm a park ranger, and I'd like to share my story with you all today. More in the sense that I want to get some opinions on exactly what happened to me. I mean, I have my own view, but I guess in my line of duty I probably think differently about threats and dangers, so I really want the outside perspective. I haven't really spoke to too many of my friends about these things because, well, even where I work, I guess like rumours spread really easily and things. I mean, it wasn't the other day that I told people at my job that I was going to be leaving soon. And obviously, I didn't give them permission to tell everybody else, but what happened? When I go back, I get complete random people that I barely even speak to saying, oh, you're leaving soon? Yeah, I don't know, it's something that's always annoyed me. I just really don't like it or appreciate it. I feel like it's a big breach of trust, and with something like this happening to me, I don't want that to be the case, but like I said, I want to hear what people think about my experience in my own words, not from the words of others who have potentially misconstrued of what happened, and the truth is what's important here. So, as I said, I'm a park ranger, but I'm going to be leaving the job soon. Now, it's not in the sense that I don't enjoy it like I used to, I just kind of need to evolve as a person, and I think being out there on my own was good for a while, but not for too long. I'm kind of like a social butterfly in the sense that I really need to be around other people, and as much as I enjoy being out there, it kind of becomes the same picture each day, and regardless of how relaxed I feel, I really feel like I need more. And I'm probably too young to have this kind of job in some regards, but not in others. So, I was stationed somewhere that we have a beautiful lake. Now, this lake is absolutely gorgeous. It's one of the most blue ones that you'll ever see. I can't remember exactly why it was so blue, but it was a really beautiful thing. Now, on the day in particular that this event happened, everything was going like normal. I was doing a number of my duties, and, well, in my country, one of those duties is to pick up rubbish that people leave behind and litter and things, however you guys say it. I didn't really have an issue with this, it just annoyed me because sometimes in the sun it would make bags melt a bit, and I guess you can imagine how bad that actually smelled. It wasn't a nice thing. But again, someone had to do it, and often it was us. Now, I started picking up some litter which is on the trail, and this actually annoyed me. I think, why on earth do people want to trash this place? I mean, literally, that's all they're doing. But I have my little grabber thing, and I'm putting everything inside the bag. So, to be honest, I'm actually enjoying the time more than I expected to at this point. The trees are given a really nice shade now, so there was no need for me to rush trying to get out of the sun. I have a camel pack, so I'm just constantly drinking from this on my journey. Now the bag gets pretty full, but I kind of had like a holster thing I could hook it onto, so it would kind of hang off the side of me if I use that stick, if that makes sense. But it wasn't too heavy, it was manageable really. Now while I'm doing this, I do notice something strange. There seems to be some kind of diving suit. Well, at least that's how it appears to me. It's probably like, I don't know if you've seen one of the Batmans with Penguin, but the old one. You know the cat lady, the thing she wore in that? It was more similar to that, but obviously had been in the water at some point. Now, I stop for a moment and think to myself, well, we do get some people that go swimming here, but you wouldn't really want to wear this for that job. And I think this is pretty bizarre. Now, I've prodded around a little bit, and I'm worried that maybe it's something weird that shouldn't be here. I gather my thoughts for a moment and realise that it's probably best if I just continue on my way. I'm going to have to come back for it another time. This is quite annoying really, because I have to go all the way back and get another one of those smelly bags to take this thing. I did try and lift it up originally with my grabber thing, but it was far too heavy and I don't want that dripping on me while I'm walking. It will not be a fun time. But I'm prepared for this and I continue on my trail. I get to a point where I decide that now's a good time to get some food in me and stop for a little bit. I'm eating some of my sandwiches and I've got some peanuts with me when I notice something drifting off in the lake. It's really bizarre. It kind of looks like some kind of boat, but it's definitely not a canoe. It's slightly bigger than that. But it seems to just vanish suddenly. It's almost like it sunk down into the water. And I get a little suspicious of this. Now, bearing in mind that I'm actually seeing this through some trees and I'm not 100% convinced myself that what I'm seeing is actually real or not. I also had my cool shades on, so that probably made it a lot harder. I take them off though, and I still can't see much of anything. I don't really have the best of eyes to be honest, and annoyingly I left my glasses back at our old station office, whatever you call it. So, I stand there observing, and I don't see anything initially. I note this is odd, and I think, well, got some more trash to pick up, and I continue on my way. Now, one thing I'd like to note is that I didn't see anybody else during this time, which is a pretty bizarre thing because, well, usually you see a couple of people around, but today, it was like one of those western ghost towns of today, where nobody's there but people were once. So, I decided that I should probably get heading back now, but not before I take in a beautiful look at this lake. I think this is really nice here, and I actually take off my boots and take my socks off and put my feet in the water. I found it was a nice way to cool down, and that with the sun on your face is really a nice thing. And as I'm doing so, I hear something in the water. Now again, it sounds like somebody's thrown something, or there's a boat that's just come ashore. I look around, half expecting to see somebody dragging things up, but I can't see anyone or anything. I presume that maybe it's a fish, but I don't think the fish here are that big, and that's not how they would normally act. I decide instead that it's high time just to get back. Now the trash is smelling pretty bad at this point, and I kind of swung it round on itself so that way it wouldn't make that much of a smell when I was walking and would kind of seal on itself. And would you know, it splits open. So now I have to spend a while trying to put things on it again and getting it back to normal and kind of making the bag smaller and the smell stronger. As I'm doing this, I noticed some more trash up ahead of me, which is strange because I was sure I cleared the path perfectly. I now know that people probably come past here recently, and I go to pick it up, It looks like some kind of note, but I don't bother actually looking at it and just put it straight in the bag. I continue on my walk now, and eventually I get back, throw that nasty stuff away, and actually have a shower there. I know that's kind of like ironic to some people listening because obviously I still have to go back for the wetsuit thing, but I just don't want to smell bad. And I'm quite germophobic, I think that's how you say it. But I don't know, I just don't like germs at all. And I was starting to smell a bit where the bag had opened on myself. But not to worry. I have my nice shower and I get a big thick bag now. I make some notes of what I'm doing in the day because where I work we have to log everything that we're doing. It's just like a general process, but it's important for security reasons. So I say goodbye to the dirty clothes and step out in the new ones with the new bag and everything ready. Now there was some cloud cover so it was a little bit darker, and it also meant I didn't need my sunglasses and I could in fact wear my normal glasses, which I was happier doing so. Now I'm able to see a lot more clear this time, and it probably would have been a good idea to bring them before, but that's in hindsight. So I start making my way again, and I realise that there's more and more trash. I keep on putting them in the bags again, and I think this is a little odd, and it's also annoyed me because obviously I've probably left the trowel with this stuff and not realised it, so now I'm doubling up on my job. The other issue I have is that there's more important things for me to do later in the day. I actually have to install a sign somewhere later on, and I'm not looking forward to it because that thing's heavy. So I just continue on and eventually make it up to where that wetsuit thing is. Now that's the thing. I say where it is because I can't find it. I can find the silhouette where obviously it was in the water before and left a water print, but there's no wetsuit to be found. I look around everywhere and I really can't seem to find it. I think maybe it's drifted in again, and what do I see? Just floating off on the shoreline. I can see it, probably about a mile away or something, and it's on the other embankment. This is no issue for me though, my friend, because I have to go over there with that sign, so I'm not too bothered. I just think it's odd because it shouldn't have been able to slip down because it was actually on some high ground, but not the kind something could roll off of, so I think this is bizarre, but again, I think maybe I'm having a bad day and I'm going a bit senile, or I don't know. So I just pick up more and more trash, and that's when I notice something odd. It all seems to be paper with things scrawled onto it, and I think, well, someone must have done some weird art project, or it was some young kid that was doing drawings and their parents didn't want to take it home. Okay, but that doesn't explain why it wasn't there earlier. So I quickly retraced my steps and ended up finishing the trash rounds. Ah yes, my favourite part of being a ranger that I missed so much, and what was actually an addition to what I was doing originally, but we'll talk about that another time. Now, I start walking back and I have a strange feeling. It's almost like there was somebody else there with me, but of course there's no one around. It actually isn't uncommon to have this feeling and sense, and I don't know. I'm not going to say that I'm someone that picks up on these things well, but it's just a feeling I'd noticed a few times before in this line of work. You're taught actually to listen to it and not ignore it because it might be a sign of, I don't know, somebody in danger. But I checked the log and there's no such reports, so I know that there's definitely nothing wrong. So I just kind of shake it off and get back. Now I'm a bit more annoyed because I have to bring this heavy signpost, but that's fine. At least I'm actually going to get that thing that I saw earlier. I decide once again not to log it though because I'm going to have a long day at this point. So I start my trek. I have to walk quite a number of miles to get through to the other side of the lake, and as I'm walking I notice something. There's two people in a canoe, but I can't really make out much about them. They're kind of in the shadow side of a cloud, if you know what I mean, so I can't really see any details in particular. But they're not supposed to be here. I know that much for absolute certain, and I wave at them and call out. What was a little creepy is they both stop and seem to stare at me, And it could be my eyes playing tricks on me, but it almost looks like one of them's wearing a kind of plague doctor outfit. It's not exactly the same as like the European ones that we had, but it's not far off, and I think this is really weird. Again, I haven't got the best of eyes, and stupidly I don't have binoculars with me, so I can't get a closer look. But I decided that I should meet them on the other side, because I think maybe they're the ones who have the wetsuit, and I have a few questions for them. So, I start walking now. Every so often, I can make them out for a little bit, but then they dart in between trees. My line of view is blocked is what I'm saying basically, but I'm a persistent being, so I keep going. Now, it doesn't take too long, and eventually I get to roughly where they should be, but they're nowhere to be found. I don't know if you guys have seen Pirates of the Caribbean, but it's almost like when the boat just sunk into the water of that weird guy with the tentacles, but they've just vanished now. I'm not really sure exactly what to make of this, but I can only presume that yes, they have gone to the other side of the embankment. Now, I'm not too much further away now, but I'm getting a bit irritated now because this is the kind of stuff that makes you have a really long day, and guess what, my boss doesn't care. He'll just let me have overtime when I'm working till like 9 or 10 at night, then want me to come in at 8 AM the next day. Yeah, you can imagine why I had to leave this place, but anyway, I digress now. So, I'm not too much further away now, and I'm very perplexed about as to where they could have specifically gone. It really doesn't make sense to me how they've just gone under. I mean, is there some kind of big iceberg which I'm missing and they've gone into it like the Titanic? Maybe, but the water doesn't feel that cold. Now, I was so curious as to where they went, I was half tempted to go for a swim. I mean, it'd be quicker than walking, but obviously I'm not going to do that. So I just make my way over to the embankment, and there it is. The wetsuit. It seems to have come snagged upon some logs and things that have fallen off from trees, so I go over to it. And that's when I suddenly feel fear come across my entire body, and I'm kind of froze, just fixated on it without thinking. It suddenly hits me, this could actually be a body. It doesn't look like the wetsuit I saw before, and I think maybe this is a person who's drowned. And I get some adrenaline, and I very slowly proceed. Something feels a little off about this situation, and it literally looks like a headless thing there. I get a big stick and I decide to poke it. I know that's 100% not what I'm supposed to do in this line of duty, but I don't know. There's nothing else I can actually think of doing that's probably going to work now. And that's when I realise something rather bizarre. Some kind of stuffing comes out, and it's not a body at all. It's almost like a farmland scarecrow, but it kind of looks weirdly put together, almost like the Catwoman suit. Now, this is where things are really weird, because this was the thing I saw earlier, but it didn't have anything in it. So that raises a question. Who filled this thing up, and why was it here on this bank? I think that's really weird, so what do I do next? Well, I grab another stick, an even bigger one this time, and kind of drag it ashore. And there's some stuffing falling out, which is kind of like originally a white colour, but it's gone to more of a dark cream, I guess. And I'm able to take it ashore, and I leave it there. I'm staring at this thing, which is almost like the farmland thing I said about, but not quite, and I don't know what to make of it. I finally call out, "Hey, whatever you're doing, you're not supposed to be." And I get a response, at least in my head, telling me to get out of there. Now, I guess some of my survival instincts finally kicked in, and to be honest, they're not always the best at all times. Not again for the work I was doing, but that's another reason I left, but hey. So, I start walking back now, deciding that this is something I should probably tell the guys about, and not necessarily investigate alone. I mean, all we've got between me and the relative safety of our office building thing, well, not a building, but you know what I mean, is the water, and I'm not going to swim. That's when I see what appears to be the two figures I saw earlier, this time on the shoreline. Now I get a much better look at them this time, and this is pretty bizarre what I see. I can see they've stopped to look at me, and one's tall but the other's relatively small. They're dressed exactly the same. They have kind of like a weird half pointy hat on, and kind of not exactly a robe but some kind of gown on, in a weird black but waxy outfit. It's different from what the mannequin was, but they don't say a word. I call out and do a big Y symbol with my hands trying to get their attention, but this doesn't work. I have a weird feeling about this, and this is another weird thing. They both start walking towards me, literally into the water. They walk until they're about head height until they just stop, and seem to vanish underwater. Now, this only took about 10 seconds, and I decided I was going to wait them out, and finally they resurfaced again. Now both going in different directions. One is going towards our station place, and the other is coming more towards me, walking slowly along the shoreline. Now, I'm pretty confused here. I go around to look at that mannequin thing and it's still there, but I decide that it's probably best if I get away from whatever this is. Now, annoyingly, I have to kind of trek through some of the more foresty area to get back. I wait for a little bit just to figure out where they're going, and definitely one's coming towards me, but annoyingly it's kind of blocking off the safe route that I already come along. I decide that I am going to have to go through this much more treacherous area, but that's fine. I've got some pretty good boots for it. Now, for some reason I didn't feel terribly under threat at this point. It's probably because the area was so nice and it was quite a good sunny day, so I didn't feel too bad. The only way I can describe my feeling is like something was just way off and I saw something I wasn't supposed to. Now, again, I don't always react with the best survival instincts, so I didn't have anything to arm myself. I just decided to pick up a stick. Funnily enough, it wasn't even a big one, but I guess I could have launched it at somebody if needed, and maybe they would flinch react and that would give me time to run away, so yes, this is the escape plan. Now, this scarecrow thing goes out of sight for quite a while, and I just stop. I think, well, why am I getting so scared of this? Is this really a threat? Or am I the ranger here? Who's in control of the situation? And I relax myself a lot more. Now, I'm stood like this for probably about 20 or so minutes, just really confused as to what to do. And I now realise that I was probably in shock a little bit, but at the time I didn't know that. I just thought I was dealing with the situation accordingly to what I could see around me. And now, as I'm standing there, I can hear something breaking through the trees. I think, God, what now? And I quickly take a step back and I manage to get behind a tree. And I then catch sight of it. I can see one of those things now. It's a smaller one, but where its face should be, it's wearing some kind of skull mask and it has black face paint on. Now, I'm telling you this because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I really couldn't. And what do I do in this situation? I get my stick and throw it as far as I can to try and distract this thing. And then it dances towards it, almost like a dog going after some kind of treat or animal, but literally dancing while doing so. I now have some real fear running through my bones, and I start making my way in the opposite direction. Now, I couldn't hear this thing, it almost just gone silent again, and whatever this is, person or God knows what, didn't seem to be following me, and I let my guard down a bit. I've now come to the conclusion that there's some pretty weird cult people out here, and maybe they're trying to get me, and maybe, just maybe, I've come across some kind of crime scene they don't want me to know about. So, I have to start making my way now, tediously, around the lake, to try and get to relative safety, and my mind slips. I completely forget about the other one. Now, I make it probably about halfway across to the relative safety and where I have a truck, but I hear something up ahead of me again. This time it sounds much more forceful and quick, so I quickly ducked down. I laid there for probably a good 5 minutes until I lock eyes with it. It was an animal. I can't remember exactly what animal it was like a big rodent, but it slowly makes this merry way towards the water, and I kind of cursed myself a bit just for being so scared. I say, come on, you have to get a hold of yourself and get a grip now. Now what's especially bizarre is that's when I notice it, what appears to be a body floating in the lake. I now realise that this is that thing I'd moved earlier. It was now floating further across, and I observe it until it comes off on the bank again, and then I see it. That person goes to grab it, but they're assisted by another one, equally as tall as them. I now realise that there's at least 3 people here. They're dressed exactly the same, and they drag this over to the shore and leave it there. Now, I was really glued into the spot for quite a long time. I'd actually stared at this whole event taking place for so long that when I looked away, my eyes took a long while to adjust to not looking at bright things again. And it was almost like, I don't know what you call it, snow blindness, but I was pretty much experiencing a form of this, because I'd been staring at God knows what this was for so long now. And I'll take a deep breath, look around and realise that I'm gonna have to get myself out of here. Now I'd actually gone off the path that I was on earlier, and I'm on a bit of a rough area a little bit, and it's not really good for crossing. I now know that I can take the long route to get back, and that's what I decide to do. I have to crawl across some areas and I'm probably gonna get wet, but that's kind of the least of my issues at this specific point. I can kind of go into one of the streams that actually feeds the larger lake that I've just come from, and I'm kind of doing like a military prone crawl around here. I don't know who these folks are, but for all I know there could be 100 of them out of here, and I'm on my own, so even though I'm not the smallest and I'm a little bit built, I really don't like my chances, and things like this really give me the heebie-jeebies, so yes, it's time to escape. Now, as I'm crawling, I don't hear anything. I still have another stick that I've picked up, and for some reason it made me feel a lot more safe. Maybe it's some kind of primitive thing and that's why cavemen always seem to have sticks, but in this specific moment that's what made me feel better, and that's what counts. I wasn't that far away from safety, but I come up to the first kind of wetland area and I really feel a bit cold because of the water. I've also managed to scratch up my elbows and my belly and my knees a bit, and I'm now bleeding. I was a little bit worried about getting infected because it's quite dirty here, and you can imagine there's all kinds of bacteria and insects, and I hate both. I know some of you are probably asking, why did I do this job if I don't like those things, and I can't tell you that. I don't really know myself. But now, I'm not too far away from the relative safety of things that I know. I managed to come up to kind of like a clearing where I can actually see across to the lake. I'm pretty worried now that maybe they've followed me around, but there's no one in sight. Now my own breathing was pretty heavy now, but then I hear another kind of breathing not too far away from me. This sounds like quite a heavy breathing, almost like it's being filtered through something. Not exactly like Fader's one, but maybe 10% similar. Almost like that you're wearing something over your face. Not a scarf, but like a plastic one. And I stop dead. I can hear this breathing, but I can't figure out where it's coming from. I know it can't be far away. It never seems to get closer though, and now I don't have the element of surprise because I cannot gauge it. I try my best to stay still and I feel my legs starting to shake, so I tense up my leg muscles and stop myself from shaking. Now this breathing does not stop whatsoever, and I'm now at a point where I must go forward to try and get to better things, and I decide that I should slowly but carefully crawl my way forwards once again. I decided that I wasn't going to stop crawling no matter what, and that's what I started doing. Now, I realized that the breathing sound is slowly getting further away with each crawl that I make forward. I managed to get about 5 minutes further from this point and I can't hear the breathing anymore. I decided it's safe to look up, and that's when I see it. Some dark figure not too far off, but this time on the other side. That's when I can see it. There's burning. I try and figure out exactly where this thing is specifically, and I'm able to approximate it to where I saw that wetsuit thing before, or the farm figure, whatever it is. There's a very thick black smoke coming off of it. I'm quite worried now that there's going to be a forest fire, but it doesn't seem likely because it's close to the shore, but that raises the question, how did that fire start and why is it there? Now, I'm not sure what to do at this point, and I start crawling again. I'm not sure whether there's multiple fires or only one, but I know that I'm not going to stick around to find out. And I eventually crawl up to the point that I'm not too far away from the station now. I start to feel a little bit better, and then I feel it breathing on my neck. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but my god man, it's like somebody takes your soul. It's almost like your brain accepts, maybe it's some kind of prehistoric man thing, but it accepts that you've been captured and you have a second to make a decision. So, with my stick in hand, almost like it was second nature, I turn around and swing as hard as I can, literally with my eyes closed, and there it is, whack. I feel a sudden pain in my hand, and I realise that I'm bleeding. My hand's now wet. I realise that some of the stick has shattered and splintered into my hand, and that's when I see it. Somebody hits the ground with a large thud, and I can't make out a face, but they're dressed in some really weird kind of occultist outfit. It's like a weird dark robe, and then I get up and run. Now this person was pretty big, probably 6 feet and at least 200 pounds, but I couldn't stop to take in too many details, and before I knew it, I make it back to the station, and I actually take off my shirt to try and stop my hand from bleeding because I was worried I was going to bleed out. I quickly get in and scream on the radio for backup and help. While the radio's still on, I make a call out to the local fire responders and say that there's a fire here. I'm not sure what to do, so I quickly go to the kitchen area and get all of the knives and hide them away. I get the biggest one I can find and I grab that. I lock all of the doors and stay on the radio with my friends, who are also my colleagues here. They can't believe what I'm telling them, and apparently the fire people are going to get there first. I warn them that there's strange individuals out here, and they say they understand. It must have took about another 40 minutes though of waiting in agony before they finally get here. And once they do, I quickly point out to where the fire was. It's now gone out and they say that they're going to investigate. Eventually a few others who work here also arrive and some law enforcement too, and they say that they're going to take over the search from here. I give the exact location of what had happened, and one of the policemen who's first aid trained actually helps to get my hand patched up. I'd really hurt my hand, but luckily it wasn't broken or fractured, which is a good thing. Now, I ended up waiting in that station for quite a long time, until eventually the fire people come back first and say there's no signs of fire, just some ashes, where something was burned. They said it was clothing, but they couldn't determine which because of the fire. But there was definitely no immediate threat, and that was a relief. That was my biggest fear. A beautiful place like this should not burn to the ground, and if there's one person that can stop it, I'm gonna make sure it's me. Now second, the police come back and say that they really can't find anyone, and they ask for an entire report of exactly what had happened. I give them everything, and they kind of doubt what I was saying, constantly saying, "Are you sure this is what happened?" And I say yes, yes, and they start doing some weird things like asking if I've taken any prescription drugs or anything. I say yes. How do you think this happened to my hand? And they say that they're going to keep some people stationed here and try and investigate until they find out what's happened. Now, eventually I got put to a different area. In fact, it wasn't even to do with the forest, it was actually on the admin side. Eventually I had to leave the job because I just couldn't bear the thought of going back there. Now, we were never able to find out exactly how many people were there or what they were doing or why they were there. And since there's no reports of similar events happening, I can only imagine that it was some kind of cults doing some really weird, ritual or whatever they want to do out there. And maybe they were trying to capture me for some kind of human sacrifice or God knows what. I'm just very happy that I managed to stop at least one of those and give them a taste of their own medicine before they got me. I'd worked in my job for about 10 years and I really enjoyed it. Though eventually I did kind of get tired of seeing the same things. Now some of my friends said, oh, maybe you should get a different job and not work as the park ranger that I had for so long. But I don't know, there was something about it that I just couldn't seem to go away from. I wouldn't say I was necessarily drawn to work in the forest, but it just kind of connected with my soul, and I'd done it for a number of years afterwards. I'd like to share some weird things that happened to me with you guys, because I think it's important that other people know about them. Now the woods are pretty big, and we don't really know too much about what's out there. Now, keeping that in mind, I'm open to the possibility that some of what happened to me was just done by weird people, but at the same time, I'm not really so sure. Now, this particular event happened when I was relatively isolated too. I was basically patrolling somewhere, and I eventually got moved to go and inspect a cabin. The cabin was fine and we knew that. I just needed to stay there for a couple of days just to complete all of my checks. Now, this is something I thoroughly look forward to. It meant I could read and drink my coffee and just bring a few newspapers up there with me and just have a nice time being there on my own. I'm one of those people where it takes a few days of getting away before my mind completely opens and gets off of the tasks and things that are around me. I was having a hard time escaping from some of the stresses of life. I was staying strong and getting on with things, but I was going full speed ahead and not really taking any time for myself to sort things. So I could really do with this break. Some of my other friends at work there said they found the same thing too, but they did report feeling weird when they were out in the cabin. They said that they had the feelings of being watched. I didn't really take much notice of this because obviously, if you're out there in the woods, these feelings can come across very quickly. So it wasn't anything to be surprised about really. I don't know. When you'd worked out there for a number of years, I guess you kind of got used to it all, so I wasn't really fazed. So, I look forward to my journey. I remembered that on my last night before heading out there, things were pretty good, and some of the other guys there were just having a few jokes with me, trying to put me off the whole thing. They said, you know, there's Sasquatches out there. You heard about the bears that can come out of the trees and things like that, just joking. I didn't let it bother me though, and I said my goodbyes and set out. I remembered going home that day. I felt pretty comfortable and happy knowing that there was good things ahead of me. To be honest, my thinking was getting a little bit more negative at the time and I needed to get away. I won't go into too many details about things that was happening, but you could say it wasn't the greatest time of my life around now. I was using work as an escape really, which isn't the best of things, and yeah, everything worked out exactly the way that I wanted to. I'm now married with my wife and have a small boy on the way, and I'm really excited about this. I got another job that I absolutely love, just at the time those things seem far away. When I get home I make sure that I packed up all of my coffee and everything else that I could need for this. I didn't have to bring that many things with me. I had some cookies and other supplies and snacks. You do get the supplies out there, but they're kind of more like military rations or MREs if you call them that. So I wanted to bring some other sugary things to make this more exciting. The cabin actually has a fridge and it's relatively well stocked, but sometimes the fridge will go out, and that's going to be annoying because you're going to have a very hungry few day tenor there, which I was trying to avoid happening to me. I remember driving over from the gas station. I actually took the wrong turn and go back to the normal place that I work, forgetting instinctively that I was supposed to be in the cabin, and I turn around. One of the rangers waves me away and pretended that he was saluting me like I was going on a military mission I wasn't coming back from. I did it back. I didn't really think much of it. As I'm driving, the trees are providing some very nice shade from the intense sunshine. Now, it is one of those summers where the sky was beautifully clear, and it makes beautiful shaded areas in the forest. It was such a beautiful place to be. I really recommend anybody that hasn't been out there before to try it, because I think it's great. So, I continue on my drive and there's some insects that are getting into my little truck, and this is annoying. One of them I couldn't get out for the life of me. I'm not sure whether it is a mosquito or what because I was concentrating on the road, but God was it annoying. I actually had my shirt off trying to bat it, but then I realised that I couldn't put my shirt back on again, and it was actually quite funny. Nobody really knows about this. This is the first time I've told people about this specific detail. Now, eventually I managed to get to where I have to park up and I dismount. I still don't know what insect had actually got into my truck. I just figure out that hopefully, after a couple of days of being locked in there, it will die. Or worse, it will have children, then I've got a new problem. But I'll worry about it later. So I get my box of things and everything and I start walking down there. Now again, the trees are absolutely wonderful. I feel really at peace and happy. There's almost like every direction that I look in, there's nature all around me. And I couldn't feel more happy. I'm honestly beaming at this point. You can see the high rock formations all around me and it looks incredible. It honestly looks like it's something out of a film. And I'll take my way across a bridge with a stream that once ran. Closer to the winter months there'll actually be more water through this, but it's just become so dry that there's nothing there. Sometimes I wonder how the trees stay so strong and lavish, but they do. Now, after probably about 2 hours of hiking and seeing lots of dragonflies and other beautiful insects, I eventually make it to the cabin, and it looks pretty dusty. It looks like it's been coated by a sandstorm or something. It's a bit annoying because it means the other people that were there before didn't actually make any effort or progress to clean it off, and I find that quite annoying. It doesn't take any effort whatsoever for people to be courteous to each other and to make our lives easier, but hey, here I am. Now, I remember the first weird thing I saw is a turtle shell. There are no turtles that should be around here, but why is there a shell here? I thought maybe one of the other workers or hikers had left it here, but I don't know. Seems pretty weird. It was hollowed out too, which was especially strange. No skeleton or anything. So, I put the key in the door, pop my things down and make my way inside. And I met with a beautiful smell of coffee. Not bad coffee, but some unopened ones that people have left around, and other little presents for me to find. This makes me very happy, and I start boiling the kettle. Now there's something wrong with the kettle and it seems to constantly boil, and I go to turn it off. As I turn around, I think I can see something in my peripheral vision, but as I look there I can see nothing. I presume that it was just my eyes adjusting from the bright going into the dark, and I don't think much of it. Though this time I'm a little bit more scared, and I decide to close the door behind me. I met with a feeling of peace, and the cabin's really nice. It's quite basic, but you have like a toilet area, a little kitchen area, and an area to sleep. It's kind of like a studio design if you were imagining a modern apartment where you've got one area sectioned off and everything else is in the same room. I don't have an issue with this though. I knew there wasn't that much water, so I have to really try and ration it. I don't have a clue when they last filled up the tank, and I don't want to be the person that gets left short of showers and things like that. Especially because of how hot it is out here, it can become really overwhelming very quickly, and I'm trying to avoid this. So I'm really having a great time at first. I decide to make some food and open up one of the MREs. After this, I drink my coffee and I have my cookies and I'm just relaxing. I know that I'm going to need lots of energy because I have lots of different areas to check. It's nothing too much, I just have to make sure that paths can still be travelled on and stuff like that. So I set out and do this. There's a really beautiful cool air as I set out and it makes me feel quite at home. As I step out, I do realise that I can see something up ahead of me. It's on one of the paths that I have to make sure is clear, and I can see it's a little bit overgrown, but I guess that's kind of normal. Basically, as long as I could get through okay, it would be a pass. If not, I would have to try and clear it out myself or make a note of it so people could come out and clear it. I actually have a shovel with me and I want to attempt to fix some of this myself. Now, as I make my way through, I come up to a large tree that looks like it's covered in moss, but is something slightly different. I'm distracted by this as I see something further. It looks like the silhouette of a person standing there. I don't think too much and think maybe, well, it's probably a hiker out here. I decide not to disturb or scare them. I think maybe if they see my shovel they might think it's a weapon or something from afar and become scared, so I don't make too much sound and just continue. I've decided that I should go around the path away from them so they don't really get spooked, and that's what I do. Now, eventually I have to loop back round and I get to the other area that I need to check out. I go across another little path which takes me over a stream that once flowed. It looks really pretty once more. I then realise that I can still see the silhouette. I do think this is particularly strange because it doesn't seem to have moved. I'm not sure whether somebody's left a jacket there, and I decide to investigate. I follow up some steps, and I keep staring at this thing, but I can't make out exactly what it is. Now, as I'm approaching, I'm feeling completely relaxed. I think it's just the environment and not really taking too many notes of the situation, but I was maybe too cautious, free, and think that I probably should have had a better approach to this as I get closer. I can see something staring at me now. I say something because I can tell it's not a person, but it was pretty weird. It looks like a black sheet with some kind of mask up on it. I can now see that it's a hood. It's not a hoodie, but it's kind of flowing down. And I can see the base of it is a tree. Somebody's left some kind of drape over this tree, and it doesn't look normal. I get closer and closer, and I presume that somebody's left a tent up here. I think it's weird because it's black, and I think, why would you want a black tent? You're honestly going to get scalderingly hot. This is certainly not the kind of tent you want out here. And I then have to start making my way off of the path. I'm a little bit annoyed about this because it starts messing up my uniform, which I really enjoy keeping pristine. I do, however, eventually make it over to the back of it and go to grab it and pull it down, but it's on there pretty tight. I then take a step to the side and I can see a skull. I don't know what kind of animal skull this is, but it kind of looked like the Halloween scream mask that you see every October, but almost like a makeshift home one. This is pretty bizarre. I eventually pull and I'm able to tear this thing down. I go to touch the part of the skull that's on top of the tree stump, but I decide I should probably leave it there. As my hands are probably an inch away from it, I just hesitate. I don't know, it just felt weird. I look this thing in where its eyes would have been for a second and I get the creepies. I realise that I can probably just kick this down though, so I use my force and I'm able to make the tree come down. And I'm quite happy. It was probably about 5 feet up in the air, the stump of this tree. And I'm glad that I don't have to see it anymore. The last thing I want to do is forget it's there, then have an absolutely horrifying moment as I make eye contact with this thing again in the dead of night or something. But that's pretty weird. That shouldn't really be there. I presume that maybe somebody's done it for Halloween, but this is in nowhere near to October. I don't know, maybe it's been there for a while, but I think this is odd. I take a few looks around and I can't see anybody or anything else. I just remembered that my hands felt very sticky too. It was almost like tree sapling, but somewhat different. It wasn't like this thing was glued up here, but it was certainly odd. I look around in all directions, trying to see if anything else is out here, but I can't see anything now. I don't think there's anybody hiding away too, but I do really think this is especially weird. It's the first time in my career actually that I've ever encountered something weird to this degree. I decide it's probably nothing and say to myself aloud, come on, you're the ranger here, let's get on with it. And I continue about my way. I go up some steps and start clearing another path. I start shoveling, and as I'm doing so, dirt is getting stuck to my hands because of whatever kind of sticky substance is on that robe thing that I pulled down, or that tent. It's actually quite disgusting. I'm usually not that creeped out by things like this, but it really makes me feel weird. I decide that I should probably head back now, and I start doing so. Now I'm not really proud of this, but I actually didn't do some of the surveying and clearing I was supposed to do for the rest of the day. I don't know, it was almost like something clicked in my head and I just couldn't do it. I kind of gone transitioning from being in the moment to being a little bit more cautious of everything, almost thinking more in philosophy about why was this here, what could it have meant. I head back and put the shovel down outside and I go in and start washing my hands. I really struggled to get this stuff off, but I'm eventually able to do so. Then I notice annoyingly that I've used up quite a lot of my water to do this. I decide that I should wrap up my shovel in bandage so that way I don't have to touch it again, and make sure that I wear gloves if I investigate anything similar. So I actually use the rest of the evening just to listen to music on the radio and try and relax. There was something about hearing that voice in the cabin that really calmed me down. I actually have the door open now because it's so hot, and I just relaxed really. Yeah, I had more of a job to do, but in this moment I was a little frightened really. This goes on for the rest of the evening, and eventually it's time to get some sleep. I close the door, have the bandage on the shovel now, leaving it ajar to the door, and go out. I take one last scan of the perimeter and head back in again. I put my stuff to the side and decide to keep a knife near where I'm sleeping now. It's something I've actually never done before, and I realise why it's a stupid idea when I woke up the following morning and I nearly stabbed myself. Funnily enough, it's not far away from my neck, and I thought, wouldn't that be funny if I ended up getting myself like that? I radio in my findings from the following day, and I actually lied about what had happened and just said everything was normal, and I make myself another cup of coffee. The cup of coffee is kind of like my morning debrief with myself, where I plan out what I need to do for the following day, what I could do differently and what I could do better, and for today, it's to not get freaked out so easily by small things. That's what I say to myself, I do some positive affirmations and I get ready to head out again. Now what's weird about this morning is that there's kind of a mist that's settled. It's not fog, but almost like a morning dew. But I haven't seen it out here before, and it makes the whole place seem a little bit Halloweeny and scary. I go to look for the shovel, and I can't find it. I look exactly where I placed it the following night, and I realise that it's nowhere to be found. No issues though. I probably simply misplaced it, I say to myself. I press on now, looking all over for this thing, but I can't seem to locate it. Okay, that's certainly weird. Again, I don't think too much of it and presume that, I was tired. I probably just forgot it somewhere. And I head out. Now I have to go about 40 minutes away from where I am now to do this further maintenance work, and I go into a really beautiful area where the trees are tall and quite skinny. That has its advantages because I have quite a good horizon here, and if there is anything or anyone, I'm gonna be able to see them now. The trees are actually really tall. I think they're probably about 50 or 60 feet or even taller. It's really cool. Don't know how many years I've been here, but I really like it. Now the mist eventually goes and I feel a lot more confident being out here on my own. I have my coffee with me, but where it started to become more summery and hot as the days progressed and the trees aren't as thick here, I'm quite hot and start to overheat a little bit, so I resort to just sipping it slowly. I'm sweating quite a lot now. I don't feel like I need the energy though, I just like the taste of the coffee. So I continue this walk and eventually find a tree that's fallen down onto the path. It's not too big, but I should be able to clear it. I don't have the shovel, but I ended up using a big stick and I'm kind of able to plant it underneath and using the end of it to tether it out of the way. It only moves about a foot at a time, but my god is it loud. It sounds like a whole tree's fell, and it made me jump at first. I don't know how my stick hasn't snapped, but I continue this process when I hear something. There's kind of like the sound of rain, or maybe like lots of cups being thrown at something. That's the only way that I can describe it. Or maybe like someone was shooting ping pong balls off of the trees. It was weird. I thought maybe for a second I set off a chain reaction or something and some other trees were going down elsewhere, but I can't see anything. Everything is impossibly still for the sounds that I'm hearing, and that's especially bizarre. Now, I scour the area for as long as I can. I even go off onto the tree that I've just knocked down to get a better viewpoint, but I can't see anything at all. This happens for about 4 minutes before slowly fading out, similar to how the sounds of rain slowly go off into the distance as the clouds go away. But that was especially weird. I'm very drawn in to where the sound was coming from, and it's further up the path, so I now head up this way. I have my stick with me still because I knew it was strong. I say it was in case there was more trees to clear, but I was a little concerned now. As I'm walking, I see movement now up the hill through the trees again. It's weird, it almost looked like something was kind of floating through the trees. I can't really tell because how far away it was, but it looked like something quite big was kind of moving through them freely. Almost like it wasn't interacting with the trees, but more just the ground on the floor. Almost like it was in another dimension. I walk as quick as I can trying to get closer to whatever this is, but I seem to get further and further away. And that's when I stop. I'm drawn to the ground as I notice something. I think my brain realised something shouldn't have been there, and what do I see? The carcass of a deer. Now, it's not really the carcass, more the bones. But only the bones. It's almost like this was dipped in some kind of acid or something, because there's nothing else around it. I can't see any flesh I can't see any blood, just a deer carcass somewhat perfectly in the middle of the path. I start searching now, trying to see if there's any other signs of anything or anyone that could have made this, but there's nothing. I look further and further, trying to see if there's anything similar, but again, I don't see anything. Annoyingly, it's my job now to move it out of the path, and I don't want to do this. I ended up prodding it with a stick for a while, probably about 10 times before I'm brave enough to actually just grab it and move it piece by piece off into the trees and the bushes. Now that was really weird. I remembered when I felt it too, it felt kind of chalky almost. Like too dry, like bone dry, but even more so. I don't know how else to describe it. The only thing that was making it wet is my hands that are sweating. I'm not sure if this is from the situation or just because of how hot it is, but I'm suddenly no longer feeling the urge to investigate further. I continue my surveying this time, and I realise that I forgot my stick. I look around and again, that was nowhere in sight, which is weird because I was sure that I left it next to me when moving the bones. Now eventually I come up to another clearing, and all is well now. I feel a lot better in this open space, just knowing what's going on around me. I finished the job for the day too, so that's a good sign that I can head back now and try and get back to some relative safety. So I turn away and start heading back in the direction and the path that I've just walked upon. Now I get back and I'm at the point where I found the bones, but I can't see them. I think maybe they've sunk down into the ground a little bit, but that's quite weird. I should still be able to see the bones, especially because of how white they are. It should stand out from the background, but they're not there. I just think it's a good thing that it doesn't have to scare anyone else, and I think, well, maybe some kind of animals wanted them for God knows what, and I start to head back. Now the hike back felt probably twice as long, which is another weird observation. Usually I know exactly how long I've been out for, but I check my watch and I have been walking for the same amount of time, and it feels dreadfully long. I'm also quite tired. I go back into my cabin and close the door, and I fell asleep pretty quickly. Actually so quickly that I didn't even eat or shower or anything. I just woke up the following day about an hour before my alarm. So I eat, I get ready and radio in, and I say this time that I did find some animal remains, but nothing out of the ordinary, and that I've cleared it. They say, "Mikey, great, good job, keep it up, not long now." I say thanks, and end the call. To be honest, I was relatively frustrated at this point because I've not really had the relaxing time that I'd anticipated, but I've still got a couple more days left, so that can come soon. So I get my things together, get ready, eat some donuts this time, which are actually on the turn. They don't taste that nice, but give me the sugar that I need to head out, and I do some extra work. Now, as I set out this time, I have to survey another area and make sure that there's been no fires here or anything. Apparently this particular area is quite susceptible to having forest fires, and we just have to make sure that there's nothing that could potentially be causing it. It could be trash that people have left behind or illegal dumping. Believe it or not, people will actually dump things out here. How they get this far out, I don't know, but they'll bury things. But the problem is, it makes methane and other gases that are very combustible, and we have fires that are deep out here and quite hard to tackle. So I'm walking down the path, and in this area the trees are also quite long and thin, but the good thing about it is that it lets you see miles around almost, or at least 500 meters in any direction, so I'm feeling safe now. To be honest, it's quite overgrown again, and a lot of the bushes probably come up to half of my height. It's okay, it just makes it a little bit uncomfortable to trek through, but that's fine. Now, I get to the area that I need to survey and I can't see anything there out of the ordinary. I do notice how the trees have suddenly got much darker now, and it almost looks like nightfall in this particular area. But that's not an issue, it just means that it's going to be a lot more cooler there, and it's going to be a lot nicer for me. So, on my go, much more braver than the last couple of days now, and I feel comfortable. So I'm mostly done now, and I take a few rests. I'm drinking water, and my canteen's actually running a little bit low. Normally this means I should just head back because dehydration is going to be really dangerous out here. But I continue onwards. I see a beautiful bird in this moment that I haven't seen before, and it distracts me from everything. I've never seen this kind before. It almost looks like a green parrot, but it's a little bit different. I notice it's interesting because in all my years of working there I've never seen it before, but that's fine. Now, I take a seat and I look up and notice something odd. It kind of looks like an owl at the top of a tree. It's quite high up, but it's a very weird shape. It almost looks like a dinosaur to me, and I think it's odd. I can also see partly through it, which I think is really bizarre. It's probably about 100 meters away, and really difficult to spot, but I do. I get out my binoculars, and I can't really focus on it that well. I know it's a bird, but it's really difficult to see exactly what kind of bird, and curiosity gets the better of me. When I was younger, I used to love going bird watching and looking out for animals like this, so I decided that I should investigate. The good thing is, it's on the path that I'm on, so I basically just have to follow it in a straight line to get to it, and that's exactly what I do. Now I get closer and closer, until I realise something odd. This is no bird, at least not no living one. Whatever this is, has died up there, and I'm looking at the bones. But again, there's no flesh at this, there's no blood, there's nothing. What only appears to be the skull and a few bones of something up the tree. How it was all held together, I'll never know, but I think this is really weird. I take out the binoculars and look even closer this time, and I soon realise that what I'm looking at looks identical to the remains that I'd found before. Now that's really odd. How on earth any animal or anything could have got up there is beyond me. It almost looks like you'd need a drone or helicopter to take it up there. It's really creepy to see. It wasn't moving though, it almost looked like the head of a totem pole with how perfectly it was stuck there. Wait, wow, am I getting scared now? I almost felt like I was in something's area and land, and it being up there was a sign that I wasn't supposed to be here. I try and mark down the exact location where I am, but I can't be too sure because I'm a little worried now. I decide to just forget about it and continue on the path and do the last parts of my surveying. I did these very quickly this time, and nothing out of the ordinary up here. I take a few seconds before I can actually turn around because I don't want to. I'm expecting to see something standing on the path staring dead at me in my eyes, but I have to be brave and turn back. I don't want to be stuck out here as nightfall comes. I turn around and there's nothing. I breathe out a deep sigh of relief and I start on the path and make my way forward. Now, I look towards where the tree is and it's still up there. It hasn't moved an inch, but I feel like my mind has miles away from the situation. I actually couldn't look at it other than that quick glance. I resorted to jogging past where the tree is. It's probably about 6 feet off of the trail, but I can't be sure again because I didn't take long enough to figure out exactly how close it was. I ended up jogging until I realise I have to stop because my eyes are starting to go a bit weird. Now, I start walking and I get to the other area where I can finish off my job for the day. The good thing about being out here usually is that you can finish the day pretty early most days and do what you want afterwards, but for me in this situation it wasn't a good thing. I'm walking as I notice some leaves fall and I get back to my cabin. Now back to my sanction and safety. It's the most relieved I've ever been to get back there in the time that I've been out. I decide that I need a sheltered day. I get in, I lock the door, close all the windows, and just have a relax. I fell asleep for about 2 or 3 hours and wake up again. I'm very dehydrated. I realise that after I'd been to the toilet and start drinking lots of water. I have a cold shower now to try and wake myself up. I finished writing up the reports of my day and findings. I actually decided to include it this time too. I thought something definitely wasn't adding up here, and it could have been chance that all these animal remains were out here, but I think it's very weird how there was no flesh and blood on any of it. I don't know what kind of animal or creature could be capable of that, but I know it certainly wasn't a hunter, because A, they're not allowed out here, and B, how on earth could they have possibly got it up there without us realising? I don't know, but I guess I don't really want to know. I remembered that I couldn't even focus on reading, which was my attempt at getaways in situations like this. I just stare at pictures of some of the couple of days old newspapers. I'm not really sure what to do. Funnily enough, I actually started doing a crossword and it calmed me down a lot. I think probably all of my brain was being used, probably the parts that aren't normally used from being in dangerous situations, and it made me fly through that thing. Or maybe it was a distraction of it all, and escaping, I don't know. But I eventually drift off asleep. I wake up again and the sunlight hits my face, almost aggressively, and I wake up once more before my alarm clock. Usually this would never happen unless I was stressed out about something or if I had something important the following day. I eventually round my energy up and make my way out of bed and quickly get all of my food in me and showered off, and I get ready for my day. My alarm clock then goes off almost in time with when I get a call from the radio. Now it was just a normal call. They're basically just asking how I'm doing, and I explain what's been going on. They actually take this quite seriously, and they're worried about illegal hunters in the area. But I explain, I don't think this is illegal hunters. I really think this is odd because there's no blood or anything. They also agree that this is a particularly weird detail of my endeavour out here so far, and they say just keep a note on it, and I start to get ready for my last day. I feel happy now and more confident knowing that my time here is now limited. So I head out and start my final day. Things are pretty normal and I almost feel like the air tastes different. Everything feels more peaceful and the usual sounds and surroundings seem to be as they were. Everything seemed a little bit too quiet for the last couple of days and I honestly forget about what had happened. I make my way up one of my trails and everything's lovely here. The trees are ones that I can see quite far along, and there's parts of them slowly falling down, and lots of plants are in blossom, and everything being in bloom makes it look so much nicer. The first weird thing I did see was a big spider on some parts of wood that I had to investigate and inspect, but it didn't jump on me, which is always a good thing. And it kept its distance, so I was happy. Now, I get towards the end of my day, and I'm feeling good. You know what I mentioned earlier, about wanting to forget about all of the worries and stresses? That comes, and I have a really beautiful peace of mind moment where nothing bothers me. All of the stresses are gone, and I feel really happy out here. Now, I actually start to feel a little bit sad knowing that my adventure's soon going to be over, and I have to return back to the normal parts of my job. The aspect of being out here in the cabin away from everyone and everything doesn't come too often, so I take a few moments to try and appreciate it more. and the sun begins to set, and I head in now. I've completed my tenor here, and it's time for me to return in the morning. I start packing out all of my things so I can leave quickly, and I head off to bed. Now, I didn't fall asleep quickly and start doing another crossword. I actually think of trying to develop my own, then realise how boring I am, and eventually fall asleep. And I'm awoken. I hear the sound of knocking on the door. I say I'm gonna come, give me one moment, and start to find my things. They persist so, and I say louder, I'm coming, just give me a moment. It seems to go on constantly though, which I think is pretty weird. And it suddenly dawns on me, nobody's coming to relieve me. It's pretty late in the night time, and something's off. I get up, look out the window and can't see anybody. Still in a dazed state, I go outside and look around, and I think I can see somebody, but I'm not too sure. I presume that it's one of the other rangers there, and I say, hey, I'm gonna sleep a bit longer, let me just go to bed. And I go back in and fall asleep quite quickly. Now I'm woken up about 2 or 3 hours later by the same knocking. This time, my conscious brain slips in, and something doesn't add up. I realise nobody should be out here but me, and why would they be waking me up so early in the morning? I realise that was not a ranger who I thought I saw. I get up quickly, and the knock-in this time really haunts me. I still have my clothes on from before, so I don't need to get changed at all, and I slowly peer out the window. As I do, I notice a deer standing up on its hind legs staring straight back at me. It doesn't look like a normal deer though. It looks terrifying and menacing, like something I've never seen before. No animal that I've known has ever been able to do this before in my life, so what on earth am I staring at? I then let out a gasp, and this thing runs on all fours. It runs into the forest and kind of takes on almost a human shape, and eventually gets off into the distance. I was stark glued to that window staring for probably over an hour, trying to see if it come back, and daylight now breaks. There's nothing there. It's just me alone in the woods. I think that I might have went into a state of shock after that, and I grab the things that I need, and I start slowly making my way out towards where the back of the cabin is. I have to put something away, and as I'm doing so, I hear my name, Mike. Mikey, come here. Look, I need to show you something. It sounds just like the other ranger who I've been communicating through on the radio with. I say hello, then go to stop myself. This can't be Mikey. I then go back in and I radio in for Mikey, who answers. I say oh nothing and I'm coming back soon, and he says see you in a bit. I think maybe he was talking on the radio and I somehow left it on. I then go back out and start making my way through the forest, but then I hear it again. Help, please help. Mikey, I'm hurt, you've got to help me. That's when I realised something was way off. He wasn't out here in the woods. In fact, it's not physically possible he could have reached me here in this time. I then start to walk very quickly, and the voice, it goes away, but then it returns again, seeming to follow me. But this does not sound like a person though. It sounded like something trying to be a person. There were breaks in its voice, and it just sounded off, where it would go deeper every so often. Mike, come here, please, I beg you, followed by crying. The crying sounds followed me for probably another 7 minutes, until eventually I get further and further away from them, and I only hear weeping and the odd Mikey, sounding more and more desperate. I know for 100% fact it was not my buddy out there. This was something far worse and menacing. The relief I feel when I see my truck is something I can't describe. I throw everything in the back and slam the door. I don't know why I slammed it so loud. I think it was to let whatever was out there know that I was in safety now, and I start up and I make my way back. I eventually get back, and I remembered the entire drive just feeling very weird, almost like I wasn't in my own body. I get into the station, and guess what? My buddy's there. He was apparently calling out for me desperately in the woods. I say, "Hey, were you out there in the woods?" And one of the other rangers looks at me weird. I say, "I heard your voice in the woods calling out for me, but it wasn't you." I then start saying more of what happened, and one of the rangers, who's a bit older, looks at me and says, "Yeah, you encountered a Skinwalker." I look at him like he's crazy, but he says, "You know, they imitate voices." And for some reason I suddenly remembered the other detail, the weird looking deer thing I'd seen. I explained that I was very delirious and very tired and that I don't think it was anything, but he then explains that apparently this is exactly what they're supposed to look like. I then tell them that I'm never going back there again, and that there were skulls out there that have to be investigated. He then says that he's going to send a few of the boys out there in a couple of weeks to figure it out. I say, "Weeks? Are you crazy?" I say, "They're going to be gone by then." He says, "No, I'm not risking it," and looks very serious at me again. Now, it turns out that an investigation went out there to find the skulls, and you know what? They could never find a thing. Apparently some of the other rangers, when they're out there, heard other voices of who they thought were other rangers, even being myself, but apparently nobody was out there. Apparently the voices actually went on for the following months before it wasn't heard again for the next 8 years, and eventually I left. Now, I don't want to jump to the conclusion what I encountered was a Skinwalker, but from how they described it and what I saw, I don't know what else it could have possibly been.